now let's go to the question. My advice would be the first out of the gate is to get yourself, as a parent, get knowledgeable about, who is trustworthy to mentor you, who's got a good long reputation, good long clean reputation, and smart and success. And then I would not dive in financially too deep that first year or two until you know that your kid wants to do it. I mean, almost every kid thinks they want to show a pig or show a sheep or show a steer. So my advice would be not to dive in too deep financially until you know that that's what kids want to do. And I want to give you a quick example. Do you know who Brock is, my son?
Yes. Yep, I do.
Okay. Brock, when he was 8 years old, and if you'd have asked me then, do you think Brock will love showing cattle? I'd have said, I'm afraid not. All he wanted to do was ride on a skid steer and ride on the neighbor's combine and drive tractors. I told my hired man, I said, I don't think Brock will ever show cattle.
That sounds like...
He had no interest in livestock. And when the light if the light's going to come on, you don't know when that's going to be. So I know I'm making this kind of long and lengthy, but every kid is different. And boy, when Brock took a hold, it was, he don't care if he does or doesn't get on a tractor or skid steer. Nowadays, it's all, he's 100% livestock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the light comes on or don't come on. You don't know until you get into it. So that's why I strongly suggest that parents walk slowly when you get started as far as what you spend. And another thing I would add to that is from a facility standpoint, I would get someone into their place that's knowledgeable and make sure they got a proper facility. So when they decide, okay, we're going to get a calf, and then they get the calf, and he's in a 10 by 10 pen and never gets out of it. Well, I can tell you right now, that calf is going to be a cripple. It's not going to work. So I'd say they need to get their facility right and have good advice on what that is before they get started.
Yeah, great. Okay, and that kind of ties into question 2, I think, so we can kind of combine those, because that was a great piece of advice. I mean, for just starting out. So
that question there is so open that it's impossible to answer. It says first-time feeding advice, and there's so many things that you got to know as far as. Let's just say you're the mom of a kid, and you're calling me for advice. Hey, we're getting our first show heifer, and what should I feed her? I need to know what breed she is. I need to know something about her lineage, breed. If they can take some hot feed, or if they're cattle that need more fiber. So the feeding thing. The one thing I can tell you about feeding thing that I always tell every group, and I'll say it again on Saturday, is it's never one size fits all. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You got to know the phenotype of your calf. Is it a calf with a lot of growth that can take a lot of energy? Is it a kind of a short, chubby calf that needs more fiber and more protein to grow? That's a couple things. There's a couple things you need to know before you can just say, well, if you're going to get a heifer, feeder fitter's edge. No one that would say that really has enough skin in the game.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. So, to get a little bit more into that, is starting off before we kind of get to the feed recommendations and everything. What are some of those things that you consider when you look at that baseline level?
I'm not exactly sure I understand the question.
Kind of like how you mentioned, you have to know the phenotype of your calf and everything. What are some of those key qualities that you look at in order to make those decisions?
Oh, as far as selecting a calf?
Yeah, kind of as a starting point. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the first thing for here, and if you interviewed 3 people that were supposed to be experts in the field, you might get 3 different answers. My answer would be unequivocally, I want one with good structure, soundness. Be it a steer or a heifer, they've got to be sound starting out. If they are not sound starting out, there's a 99% chance they will not be sound when you hit the show ring, be it the middle of their career or the end of their career. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to be sound. as far as what I'm going to pick as a first-time parent for my kid, that again kind of is relative to the kid. If I've got a real timid kid, and I've got a choice of buying an Angus or a Hereford heifer for him, for example, Herefords are known to be much more docile than Angus. I'm probably gonna go in terms of a Hereford in that scenario. If I've got a kid that I think could handle either or, I'm gonna select a breed of cattle that I think will have the most return on investment once they leave the show ring and become a cow, and I have a way to recoup some of my investment, or maybe even start my kid a small cow herd. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I think is just as important as the kind of cattle I would pick is this is something hardly anyone ever talks about, is when I buy cattle this fall, I'll buy cattle from roughly 12 states, and I always ask the breeder of the cattle what they've had for vaccinations. But even though they tell me, when I get those cattle home, I vaccinate those cattle like they've never been vaccinated before. Because a lot of those vaccines are only 80%, you only got an 80% guarantee that they even take. Sometimes it takes a booster to be covered.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So vaccinations right out of the gate, and that's something nobody talks about. It's like, well, what kind of calf do I buy? What breed should I buy, and what should I feed it? Well, if it's not properly vaccinated, and you get that calf on feed good, and you're feeding the coals to him and giving him a great feeding of Fitter's Edge, and he hasn't been properly vaccinated for blackleg and happens to get interclostridial, you go out there one morning and the best doing calf in your life is going to be dead.
Yeah.
So that's something I think, even as a feed company, I know we're not selling vaccines, but if we want to really mentor these kids right, they need to go to their vet and get those things properly vaccinated.
Yep. Yeah. Start with a healthy calf for sure.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. So when it comes to beginning to choose the feed, I mean, once you've started with the basics here, how important is choosing the right feed for your show cattle for that particular calf? Even if you're going to supplement later on, the baseline feed, how important is that?
Right now, I would tell you 4 things that I can think are the utmost important if you have any thoughts of success, okay? Is proper health on the calf, proper feed, a proper hoof trimmer, and a facility that allows those cattle. I don't care what their phenotype is. They've got to have a place to get out and exercise. Cattle are not meant to be locked in a small area, and if they do, most of them will go cripple. So your facilities is just as important. Your vaccines, your feeds, and of course the quality animal you start with.
Yeah, great.
But once you get that calf, here's where I'm going with this. I'm not trying to be short or rude, but as far as as far as some of these questions, when you say how important is the right feed, that in itself is a great question. But there's no way, if you were calling me today to tell me you bought a shorthorn heifer from so and so, and what should I feed her from, and she weighs 900 pounds. If I started telling you what to feed that heifer, if I was you, I'd just hang up on me because I don't have near enough information. I don't know, what her phenotype is, what her body score is right now. So that in itself is a great question. How important is the right feed? It's very important. Our different levels of feed are very important to what the particular animal you're feeding is getting fed. Very important. And it said the added extra on that was, even if it's supplemented, you just simply got to know what you're feeding, to what, and why you're feeding it to that particular animal, and maybe why 3 weeks from now we're going to change that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So maybe that's because where I'm envisioning this article going is all of these points that you're making are excellent things to include in the article. So I think we're going to kind of build the framework around those points as far as considering all of those elements within your feeding program and how important the health is, as well as the facilities, and then the feed too in the middle of it. So
Yep.
I think,
The thing about that question is how important is the feed? If I give you the best advice known to man on how, I come look at your heifer and I tell you what Purina feed and how important is the right feed and which one should you be feeding your heifer, but you got your heifer in a little box stall, and you don't have your heifer vaccinated, you don't have her pre-breeding shots so you can get her bred. And Purina may not like that I'm going to say this, but I say it on an open mic. This is not miracle in a bag. You've got to do in order for that right feed to do the right job. That animal's got to have clean, fresh water. They got to have exercise. They got to have proper vaccination, proper health. Can't be locked in a building in the winter and get sweaty because that's when you get pneumonia. So it's very important to feed the right feed, but it's got to be in combination, because if we as Purina just say, well, if you got this kind of heifer and you're feeding her Fitter's Edge with Fitter's 35 to keep fat out of her chest, but all those other things I just talked about are omitted, guess who's going to get the blame for that heifer looking like crap when she hit the show ring?
right, exactly.
Purina feed.
Yep, it's the whole picture that kind of goes into it.
It's the whole picture. Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah. So getting into a little bit more of the feed end of it, I mean, once you have the right setup and everything and the vaccinations and you're kind of going along smoothly and everything with that, getting enough exercise, which feeds do you know how to use, or which feeds do you know to use with your particular calf, and how do you decide that?
Okay, can we... number 5 said, how do I know which feed? And that's the one you're on, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at.
Okay. What I want to do is I want to combine 5 and 7 with our
yes.
different feeds.
Sure. Yep, that sounds great.
Okay,
Perfect.
Okay. So full range, it was the first one on the list. So how do I know which feed? Full range is going to be fed to a calf that comes in. Full range or finishing touch. You can combine those two together. They're higher energy feeds, okay?
Okay.
Finishing touch has power fuel in it. Power fuel is a fat additive. Those are two feeds I would feed to a steer or a heifer. A heifer that's a little green or a crossbred. Now, I can't think of a situation. It'd be very, very unique for me to feed an Angus or a Hereford heifer finishing touch or full range, because they get fat so easy that we're going to talk about other feeds for them. Mm-hmm. So on a market animal, finishing touch and full range would be two feeds I would think of for a market animal. Okay.
Okay.
There's more energy in those. Now, a side note you may put in there is our belief is, getting steers ready for the state fair. Our belief is we're really pounding it to them right now. Now we're feeding Fitter's Edge with power fuel, okay? And that's almost the same as feeding finishing touch.
Okay.
The reason we feed that is our cattle love Fitter's Edge. I mean, once in a while we'll have them back away from the finishing touch a little, but we never have a head of cattle that won't just dive into the bump on Fitter's Edge. So to our steers, we're feeding Fitter's Edge with power fuel. And in a unique case, like the steer we won the state fair with last year, we took him. Do you go to any prospect shows? I don't personally, no. I was a show pig girl. I grew up showing pigs. Okay, perfect. No, that's fine. But we middle of April last year. This year it's the 22nd April. We went to Black River Falls, and a lot of times, and this is something that on one of these bullet points I think we need to talk about is a lot of times it's good for these kids to get these calves out and show them at a prospect show and kind of see where they're at. I mean, we see these cattle here at home every day. And actually, I don't. I travel a lot, so that's an advantage to me. By the way, that you may at some point you may want to make a note of when you said when do you. Later on, we're going to talk about when we know when to change feed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you see an animal every day, I don't care if it's. I would assume pigs are the same. Pigs change quicker than cattle, though. But like I just got back from a 2-week trip. I left 2 weeks ago this morning. I just got back last night, and I'll look at my daughter's cattle, and in that 14 days, I'm going to see probably a drastic change that I may not notice if I look at them every single day. Okay?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, the steer we won the state fair with last year, I thought we had him right where we wanted him until we went to Black River Falls, and I got him out in the ring, and he looked a little green yet. By that I mean he needed more condition. Now, keep in mind, that particular steer, he was a moderate frame steer. He was a crossbred steer. But what we did with him when we got him home, he was on Fitter's Edge and Power Fuel. And I thought he looked a little harsh right behind his shoulders. So what we did is we brought him home and we took him off Power Fuel and put him on Heavyweight. Have you ever fed Heavyweight to a hog?
That one I haven't. Nope.
Okay, Heavyweight is like a milk replacer looking product. It's a white powder.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's 70% fat, whereas Power Fuel's I think 32% fat.
Yeah.
So for 30 days, and I'm just trying to put it in your head, why we change certain things, and more importantly, probably when.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so for 30 days, we put him on Heavyweight. We wanted to lay some fat behind his shoulder to fill that in. And we felt in 30 days we'd accomplish that, so we took him off of Heavyweight, put him back on Power Fuel.
Okay. So you kind of, you
stayed
used
on Fitter's Edge.
the Prospect Show to sort of, to kind of assess where you were at.
That?
And so you use the Prospect Show to kind of...
I use the Prospect Show to gauge, I get to see him in the lot every day, and I don't, I had other cattle here to compare him to, but I think it's just a good gauge to two things. One is for sure watch and see how they're walking, if their ankles are staying down, if their structure's staying good. Sometimes too much energy will cause them to get up on their ankles, to get stiff-legged. And if I feel on a steer or a heifer, if I've got enough condition on them, then I'll back down to full control, which is our high fiber, lower energy feed. But you really gotta. I think what I want to come across as saying here is that you can't. I cannot advise you. We're going to pretend you're calling me for advice on a steer that you think's good enough to compete. You can give me all the information I ask for, but I really think I need to see that steer. Unless you're 1,000 miles away, if you live in Sauk City and are trying to compete for the state fair, I think I need to come look at your steer. Because I need to see his structure, I need to see his joints. So there's a lot of issues that, I'm not trying to be evasive here, but some of this stuff I can't answer just a point blank. This is a simple answer to this question. Yeah,
nope, that's no problem. Yeah, I think as long as we can get kind of the general gist. Even if we, in this article, just explain that, you have to feed for your individual scenario and really take a look at some of this stuff and maybe how to consider those things versus what the recommendation would be. That's a great point to make too.
And one thing you might want to add, different, it's one of these questions asked about a family's goal, their feeding goal.
Yep.
And everybody's goal is different. Quite honestly, and I don't mean to sound smart here, but our goal is when we make a purchase is to win in the end. Otherwise, why do it? Now, sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And quite honestly, that's most families' goals, but it isn't every family's goals. Some families just love showing livestock on weekends with as a family, and they're accepting, and I'm fine with that. They're accepting of the idea that we're probably not going to beat this calf or that family, or but we like doing it, and that's all cool. But the goal thing, that's got to be each individual family.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. I don't know. Maybe if I don't know if we want to maybe go down the line with the products, and maybe if you just want to, in your own words, perhaps go through the benefits of each of the products.
Each product.
Yeah, that would be good, probably.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. We quite honestly, we don't feed full range, but it's a higher energy feed. We're either going to feed Finishing Touch or Fitter's Edge with Power Fuel added. So full range, a little more corn in it. Great feed. Cattle like it. The people that have fed it really like the performance our cattle do to get them caught up and get them up to where they need to be condition wise. Full Control was a feed we had for a while, and then it went away, and they brought it back, and it's probably the thing I like the best that Supreme has done is brought Full Control back. That is, if I was just to label that with two words, it would be that's our heifer feed. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's really a struggle to keep heifers lean enough. I mean, and this might be a little hard to understand if you haven't showed cattle. To be a good cattle showman, you have to be a little bit of a hypocrite, because while we don't, you're going to get your heifer beat if she's gaudy fat, and you're not going to be able to win with your heifer if she doesn't have enough condition on her. See what a fine line that is?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But full control. If I was just to rate it, we've even fed it to a few steers now again. But that's our heifer feed, day in and day out. That's our heifer feed. Grand Fortifier is our grind and mix. That's an awesome program there. That's more for like creep feeders. Some people do it, with their project at home. We actually feed blended feed out of the bag, but the grind and mix is Grand Fortifier. Just it's as good. Quite honestly, it's a little more labor. Mm-hmm. Fitter's Edge is absolutely our favorite. Like I said, on heifers that need to get caught up, until we get them caught up and put them on Full Control, we'll feed those Fitter's Edge. And then steers, we feed Fitter's Edge. Sometimes that's enough to get a steer fat on, depending on the steer and his phenotype. If it's not, we'll add Power Fuel. And in the extreme scenario, like I gave you about our State Fair steer last year, we realized he was still a little bit behind. He wasn't behind on weight. In fact, some people thought he was too heavy at the time, but he was behind on conditions. So that's the steer we put on heavyweight with Fitter's Edge for 30 days. Finishing Touch is exactly what it sounds like. That's a finishing feed for a market animal. In an extreme case, you may feed it to a heifer that's really skinny and needs to get caught up. We essentially turn Fitter's Edge into Finishing Touch. We just add Power Fuel to Fitter's Edge, and we've got Finishing Touch.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah, that was perfect. Let's see. So I think the next question here with the most common scenarios, that one, I think now as we're going along here, it might be a little difficult to answer because, like you said, you kind of have to take a look at each individual case.
Yes, but I actually think that one's pretty simple as far as I gave you three common scenarios. Okay, one was an animal being too fat. Mm-hmm. Now that's I'm normally talking about heifers here. On an extreme occasion, we've had it happen on a steer. Usually we're fighting hard to get a steer fat enough to make him market ready to win a market steer show.
Right.
On occasion, you'll get that steer that just could get fat on air and water. So on a fat one, we use our Fitter's 35, which is 35% protein.
Yep.
And Full Control. That's for a fat one.
Perfect. Okay.
For a skinny one, we go the other way. We feed either Fitter's Edge or Finishing Touch, and in our case, we use Fitter's Edge, but we add Power Fuel or heavyweight, depending on the extremity of his skinniness. Okay.
Okay.
Now, on a shallow-bodied one, that's where we go after we added power feel or heavyweight to our fitter's edge, or else we just fed straight finish and touch. That's what we do on a skinny one. On a shallow body, one that needs more depth of body, we feed either Ultra Full, and that's the best product on the market as far as getting them lower in their flank and in their lower belly.
Yep.
We can feed Pre-Con for that, or if they need more belly up high, if they're good in the lower part of their belly, but they, how they can look kind of gamp.
Yep.
Then we feed Depth Charge.
Okay, perfect.
Now, one point I want to make with that, and I want to make sure I'm probably the only ambassador that makes this point, and I really do think it needs to get made. Right, I've been involved in the show ring for 45 years, and for 45 years we've seen fads, big tall cattle, narrow cattle, little short stubby cattle. I mean, it's so fad driven, and a lot of times it doesn't parallel with the true cattle industry.
Yeah.
But right now, let there be there's no dispute that right now depth of body is the in thing in show cattle, be it steers or heifers. And one mistake I think Purina makes, and like I said, everybody goes kind of quiet when I say this. It's like they don't like me saying it. I don't know. I could be reading them wrong, but I'm all about the supplements I just told you about on a heifer, the Ultra Full, the Pre-Con, or the Depth Charge.
Yeah.
I'm all about that on the heifers. I got no problem with that. But what I see happening from the time I start doing demos in December until May, some kid will ask me a feed question, and I'll say, well, first thing I ask him is, tell me more about your steer. Is he tall and small? We go through all the things you and I have already talked about. And he'll have him on, let's just say, a scenario of fitter's edge and Pre-Con for a mark. Now keep in mind, I'm talking about a steer now, not a heifer.
Yep.
And I'll ask him, well, why do you have him on Pre-Con in December? Well, because these judges like him to be big bellied. Well, here's the thing. If you're not feeding your dry matter energy feed to that steer to get him market ready, you may have his belly looking awesome. But come August, when my steer's weighing 14 1/4 and that young man's steer's weighing 1,300 because he was feeding him Pre-Con fiber in January and December when he should have been putting gain on him, I'm putting maturity on my calf. So I know why they're doing it, because every judge is like, well, a steer that wins a class, he's way bigger belly than the steer that stands second. And I truly think if you want the product in the end to win in the end, these steers we should not be worrying so much about making big bellies on them. And here's the point I definitely want to make. I can by tweaking a steer with the products we talked about, Ultra Full, Pre-Con, Depth Charge, I can change the belly. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant that I can do it. You can do it too. We can change the belly on a calf in 2 weeks, but you can't get one fat in 2 weeks.
Yes, yeah. So it's mostly.
So
I think.
Go ahead.
So if I'm getting this right, it kind of sounds like you're saying like the timing of when you're feeding these things is kind of what you want to pay attention to versus the end goal, perhaps.
Yep. Well, another point that I need to make on that is on a market steer, or a heifer even, with maturity, with condition, normally comes a bigger belly as they mature and quit growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all I'm concerned about right now. When this weather's cool, I'm just pounding the hell out of these cattle and feeding them hard, trying to get 3.5, in some cases 4 pounds of gain a day.
Yeah.
And the reason I believe that's correct is because once we hit mid-May and this weather starts to warm up, first thing cattle do is they back off feed.
Yep.
Well, if I've got a steer that's behind condition-wise, because I'm feeding Pre-Con now to have his belly nice and big, and then we hit May and June, he backs off feed. Now I'm in a real bind for August.
Yeah, you can't catch up that fast.
Can't catch up. Not in maturity-wise. Now, truly, you can, with the products we got for supplements, you can fix the belly on one in 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
But it could take 60 days to get one mature enough.
So when you're in that stage right now where you said you're feeding your cattle really heavy and trying to get, up to that weight and the fat and the maturity, what is your kind of secret combination for doing that at this time?
Say that again, please. When I'm trying to accomplish those things, what now?
So like right now when you're trying to focus on the gain and the maturity end of it versus the depth, what are you feeding at this time right now to do that?
Fitter's Edge and Power Fuel.
Okay. Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. I think maybe down to the last question in this section. What's the biggest mistake people make with show cattle feed, and how can they adjust it?
I'd say that the feed, I think it was a two-part feed management, right?
Yes. Yep.
The one bullet point I'd make is a lack of exercise as far as management.
Okay.
Feeding at the same time every day. Some people will tell you need to feed at 7 in the morning and 7 at night. Quite truthfully, we don't live by that here. Right now we're feeding at 7 in the morning and about 5:30 in the evening. But it's the same every day. I mean, it isn't 7 this morning and 9 tomorrow. I mean, I think when you pick the time, you stick with it. It doesn't have to be 7 and 7. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Just as long as it's the same each day.
Yep. I don't. Another big mistake I see made is people have their calves on a full-time feeder. I do not like that at all.
Yeah.
For several reasons. One is you're not as good a manager of keeping up with the health on your calf. If that calf's a little sick today, and you know that you filled the feeder yesterday, and you're going to the movie tonight, that calf may lay off in the corner of the lot, have an ear down or a snotty nose or something, and it's easy to not see it because you don't walk out there and feed them every day. So I do not like a feeder. And so that's a scenario. And plus, we talked early in this conversation about a lot of these cattle get stiff-legged and stiff-ankled when they're getting too much energy. And some of those cattle, they're just like people. Some people, I might be one of them. Some people will eat what's in front of them instead of knowing what to get. And some cattle are like that. So I don't like a feeder. I think that's a big mistake in feed and management. I definitely want them to have clean water and have plenty of exercise. And then probably what we've been talking to about up to this point, probably the biggest mistake is people want to do this project, they need to get good advice of is feeding to their, for the things we just talked about. A skinny calf gets this, a fat one doesn't, So they've got to get good advice on feeding to the phenotype and the genetics of what they just purchased.
Yeah, great. Okay, those are all really great points. I feel like that kind of just wrapped up a lot of what we were just talking about. So if we want to maybe go on to the next section with just a few of those there. Let's see. Any in there that you want to start with, perhaps?
I think 11 said the best setup, and we've touched on most of it. I think spacious lots, never locked in a small pen. I mean that probably is one of the biggest recipes for disaster I've ever seen. I've literally sold kids projects for 45 years, and I can tell when a calf comes off the trailer to get his feet trimmed. If I've never been on the farm, I can tell what kind of scent by the way they move and, clean bedding, spacious lots, not being on a feeder but being hand-fed, never feeding over wet feed, and then the storage of the feed needs to be, contained and dry. In the summertime, I like to have all that feed covered, so flies will land on that feed, and there's fly crap on it, and of course your project gets to eat that,
Yeah, great. Okay. Let's see. Maybe if we want to jump down to making adjustments. So 16 and 17, how do you know when it's time to make the adjustments?
That's a great one. Yep. That's all visual. That's all visual. We have this is something I'd like for you to certainly note. As far as making adjustments, first of all, I want to address something else, and I think it's in another question about feeding multiple ones together. We'll kind of combine them together.
Sure. Yep.
Unless you have a scale in your barn, I'm talking more about steers now than heifers. Heifers is strictly visual. Are they moving good? Are they too fat? Are they not fat enough? That's visual. On cattle, if you're feeding, let's just say we're feeding 3 steers together, and quite honestly, we are right at this moment. Our 3 steers we got on feed. 2 are for the state fair, 1's for Kansas City. They're all eating in the same lot. But every Monday morning, at the same time, after they're done eating, we weigh those steers. And the reason we do that is because we know all 3 steers are good eaters, but we know what they weighed when we started, and we knew what the weight variance was between those 3 steers when we started. It's all documented. I keep a weekly log or daily log.
Yeah.
And anyway, the reason that scale is so incredibly important is because visual won't always give you what you need. So when we bring those steers in on Monday, we want to know that they're still all gaining 3.5 pounds a day. And we also want to know that, let's just say there's 3 steers, which there is, and 2 of them are gaining 3.5 pounds a day, and all of a sudden one of them's dropped back, and the weight variance between him and the next one, when last week it was 40 pounds, this week there's 60 pounds difference. Okay?
Yep.
Now I'm a little concerned. Is the steer that's dropping behind, is he not performing as well? Is he not eating as well? And that's when I want to get him out of the lot with 3. I truthfully don't like to feed multiple cattle together, but many families have to.
Yeah.
And to me, the strongest suggestion I could make is, if you're going to feed them together, go out and invest in a scale so you know where you're at.
Yep, that makes sense.
Oftentimes, on a side note, I'll get to the state fair, and some young kid, I came from nothing. I mean, I watched them sell my dad's farm on the courthouse steps when I was 21 years old. That isn't a sob story. I don't want in any part of this interview you think I'm talking down on someone that's doing these things. I lived it. I mean, that's where I started too.
Yeah.
But I'll get to the state fair, and I'll see some young kid not argue, but question the weigh scale person and say, "Oh, calf, he's got to weigh more than that. He weighed this in March, and now we're up in August, and that's the last time that calf has been weighed."
Oh, that's a long time.
So that kid, yeah, it's a long time, and you don't know where your performance is at. So I don't like feeding them together if I'm not keeping up with their weights. That's ultra important. When you say, when do you make the adjustments, I think we may have touched on this earlier, but I travel a great deal. Today will be 14 days since I've seen my daughter's cattle. They actually took them to a show last weekend while I was gone. And now, when this interview is over, I'm going to go out and I'm going to evaluate those cattle against what I saw 2 weeks ago, okay?
Yeah.
And that's why that's important is, when we touched on this, you said you show dogs. When you see a head of livestock every day,
it's hard to see what's going on.
Needed. You don't see it.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You just don't see what's right in front of you. Example being, years ago I was fitting a bull for a guy, and we had a guy from Texas come up and look at the bull. And I thought this bull was like the second coming. I thought this thing was as good a beast as would ever live. And this gentleman from Texas, who is one of the sharpest cattle eyes I've ever seen, I saw the bull every day. I took care of him every day. He wasn't in the lot 2 minutes. He said, "I love the bull, but he's a little straight-fronted, isn't he?" And at that moment, when those words come out of his mouth, I mean, I was very disappointed that he thought that, but I looked at that bull and then I could see it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So being away from livestock is a big advantage I have. You know, my hired man sometimes, I've had the same hired man for 36 years. And sometimes I think he gets a little frustrated with me because we're feeding a certain feed, Bitter's Edge, Full Control, whatever, when I leave 2 weeks ago and I come back 2 weeks later and say, okay, I think that heifer's got to come out of that lot. She's getting a little fat, or that heifer's not keeping up. So the adjustments, you really got to be paying attention and watching those cattle. And most people aren't like me. They're there every day. So they just got to see if that one's progressing, and if the conditions coming, and in a heifer, if you're feeding supplements for belly, if the belly's getting better, if not, do I need to switch fibers to get more belly?
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is, I mean, if they're looking at their project every day, and it's difficult for them to kind of see the differences as time goes on. Over a stretch of time, do you recommend kind of bringing in that second set of eyes, like you said in some cases, or taking photos along the way?
Absolutely, that's an excellent point you just made. An extra set of eyes, like I said, that experience that happened to me on that bull years ago. I wasn't a novice. I mean, I'd been doing it already for 15 years. And what was happening right in front of me, I didn't see it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought the bull looked awesome. He'd come to the feed. He was healthy, but and we fixed it with hoof trimmings, but I didn't see it. Another set of eyes is always good. The most enjoyable times I've ever had judging a cattle show is when I've been the associate to another good cattle mind, because I mean, we're human. We can miss things, you know.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. So, I think you kind of going back up to here to a few of the different ones. As far as feeding, I mean, there are a lot of people I know that feed the supplements, and we get a lot of questions, especially on social media, regarding the supplements and everything. But if you're feeding the high quality supplements with a lower quality feed, you know, something that maybe anything else besides on our show chow, I guess, where does that kind of come in if you're feeding the supplements but not the feed?
I read that one, and I sure don't want to come across as a cold answer, but for what it costs to put in a facility, buy the livestock, feed the feeds, the supplements, whatever. I mean, I understand cutting corners where you can, mm-hmm. but, you know, I mean, I guess if you want to feed a low energy feed and add our supplements, you're going to get good results from that. I just didn't know exactly how to take that question where, you know, this is expensive. This project is expensive. Well, it is to the degree of actual figures on paper what it costs to do this. But I'll also add with that, and I don't mean to go philosophical on here, but for what our kids see nowadays, you know, things that aren't maybe so healthy for them and good, to have those kids in the barn and doing these projects and knowing where they're at, then to me it's not expensive. I would hate to tell you how much money we've spent over the last. Well, we've been doing it. I've got a stepdaughter too, and she did it years ago. So we've been doing it for 20 years. There's been a lot of money spent over those 20 years to put good cattle in this barn and put high quality feed through them, and hopefully good management practices. So, I mean, you're going to get better results if you're feeding a cheap feed and feeding our supplements. There's no doubt about it. Our supplements are awesome. I have a little trouble connecting the dots why you would feed a lesser quality feed to something that maybe I'm having trouble making that connection, because not everybody is buying a steer heifer hoping to win a national show. We went to our last Denver this year because of age. and I'd give my little finger to win Denver. We certainly didn't cut any corners on feed or anything else on that steer, and it didn't happen. I mean, we got second in class, and so be it. But not all families approach it with that same level, and that's fine. You know, our supplements will definitely. I made a long story out of this. The supplements will definitely intrigue a lower quality feed. I'm just not sure why you would do that, though.
Yep, that's. I mean, to be honest, the exact answer that we were kind of looking for is that, you know, you don't want to cut corners, obviously, in any case possible that you can avoid. But you know, what you get out of it at the end of it for what you put into it is kind of priceless compared to the cost of what goes into it. So, yep, that's a great answer. Let's see. Are there benefits to feeding products from the same line? So if you're feeding one Honor Show Chow feed, you know, is it beneficial to incorporate a different feed with it and kind of switch back and forth between the same line when you're making adjustments?
I'm not exactly sure I understand that question. Is it beneficial from the products from the same line? What do you mean by that exactly?
I guess maybe because I think from what we've seen too, we're kind of trying to connect the dots between feeding the feeds in combination with the supplements, that it kind of makes an entire program that they're all kind of formulated to work together.
Well, in a general sense, I mean, have you met Kevin Burgoon?
Not in person, but I'm hopefully hoping to make it down to the VIP in June. So hopefully I'll meet you all down there.
Okay. He's our nutritionist, and he blends these feed, and he's truly one of the 5 smartest men I've ever met in my life. Okay, and so, I mean, he just is. And one thing I'd like to say about the Purina feeds is if I was just to, if one of your questions is give me one word to sum up what you think of Purina feeds, is the word I would use is consistent. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean cattle eat the feed. We don't get a bag of lumpy, crappy, moldy, or the opposite, so dry they don't want to eat it. It's consistent. I dare even say this to you, but I'm going to anyway. One thing I've noticed is we hardly ever deal with a bloated animal. Okay, and that's really critical, because bloat can be the kiss of death.
Yeah.
The last bloated animal, and I pray to God literally that, you know, sometimes I say I haven't had a speeding ticket for 10 years, and then on the way to town I get a speeding ticket. You know.
Yeah, we don't want to jinx anything here.
The last year I've had plenty of it. Well, I've got experience in that field. But in 2008 is the last time we had a steer that had a bloat issue.
Wow.
And so that's 10 years. And we got it fixed, and I mean, he went on to win Kansas City. We didn't lose him or anything, but that's of utmost importance. That if you're going to spend the money it costs to feed Purina feeds, you're getting the whole product. Fitter's Edge. Most of the steers, and I don't say this in bragging, but Doc and Lauren have won the state fair 8 out of the last 11 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those steers just got Fitter's Edge. They didn't get any supplement. The feed was good enough on its own.
Wow.
Last year, like I told you, we added heavyweight. The year before, we did not add heavyweight. The year before, we did not add heavyweight or power fuel. We did the feed on its own. Took them to that level.
That's pretty amazing. Wow.
It is an amazing feed. I mean, maybe when you hang up, you're going to think this guy's a little lazy because he could be using the grind and mix, which is cheaper than brand fortifier, and I don't. I just like pouring it out of the bag. They got it blended like Doc Burgoon designed it, and it works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So I think, we're just about to the end of the interview time here and everything, and I don't want to hold you up all day long. So I think maybe just a couple more questions in the bottom here to wrap it up for us. Let's see. Maybe on number 20, even if you have a steer or heifer with mediocre genetics or, some things that you would like to fix on them or kind of improve upon, how can you use the feed and management to improve upon those things?
I don't mean to be short with my answer here, but the right feed, you're not gonna turn a sow's ear into a silk purse.
Right.
I mean, it's not miracle in a bag. And nor is any other feed. Is it going to make them better and enhance them? Absolutely. Champion Drive, we didn't talk about that. That'll give them more muscle shape.
Yep.
That's one of our supplements. But you can't, on an extreme case, you can turn a mediocre one into a champion. But as far as living by that, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Number 21, quickly here, the latest trends. Belly sweep is for sure the latest trend. And that's why earlier in the conversation when I said that about kids feed market steers pre-con back in, December, January, and February when they should be feeding energy.
Yep.
But we're fixing, I think you can mark this down, we're fixing to back away from that belly sweep a little bit here. There's been enough judges talk about how we've gone overboard, and that's what we do in the show ring. We always go overboard.
Yeah.
And then we pull it back. Hogs are the same way, I think.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So at this point, I guess, is there anything else that you would want to add into this article, knowing that we're focusing on the feeding strategies and the feeds? Because we do have a different article that's slated for focusing on the supplements and everything too. So anything else that you would like to add that you think is important that we talk about with feed?
I don't think so. I think it's important you get it in there what I said about Purina feed, because I've talked to other people that feed other brands of feed, mm-hmm. and some of them really like other brands of feed. But the complaint I hear, if I'm going to hear a complaint about other feeds, is it's not consistent. They get a bag that's too dry. They get a bag that's too wet and clumpy.
Yeah.
We don't. Consistency is the rule when it comes to these Purina feeds, and that's we think that's so important to keep cattle on feed. To accomplish the goal that they claim their feed will do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great aspect to highlight. We'll definitely include that in the article.